The Galactic Concord Summit was the most significant diplomatic event in 5 centuries. 37 spacefaring civilizations assembled on a neutral orbital platform hovering above the ancient star Veos. It was meant to mark the end of bloodshed, a treaty to silence the last remaining war drums. Delegates of every major power arrived with their fleets orbiting at a respectful distance, their embassies secured by elite guards and artificial intelligences. Every species, from the crystalline Vethari to the gaseous Thul, had fought or brokered their way into that room, except one. Humans were the anomaly. Earth was a latecomer to galactic civilization. Barely 100 years since achieving faster-than-light travel, their presence at the summit was, at best, controversial. The Ilari had objected. The Thrak dismissed them as primitive war makers. The only support came from the small Alak merchant guilds, who saw in humanity a chaotic brilliance they couldn't fully explain, but feared missing out on. Despite resistance, the humans came. 2 delegates entered the chamber, unarmed, unguarded, calm. Their clothing was formal but unfamiliar, devoid of embedded tech or armor. Their names were barely pronounced before the conversations resumed, dismissing them as observers. They were seated at the edge, away from the central axis of power. The summit commenced with hours of protocol and posturing. The Thrak demanded disarmament terms favorable to their border colonies. The Ilari insisted on psychic oversight of peace accords. The insectoid Cthari refused to concede mineral rights on a moon they conquered 3 decades ago. Old wounds bled into every sentence, and the meeting teetered between cooperation and collapse. The humans listened. They took notes, whispered occasionally, but did not interrupt. Their restraint was noted, initially with scorn, then with cautious curiosity. They made no demands, no grandstanding speeches. It was as if they were waiting for something. When the 4th round of negotiations spiraled into bickering over prisoner exchanges, a human delegate finally spoke. How many worlds died before you decided peace was convenient? The sentence wasn't shouted. It was calm, almost disinterested, but it silenced the entire chamber. Even the Ilari, whose telepathic networks hummed continuously in the background, went quiet. The translator AI processed a sentence 3 times before displaying it. The human didn't elaborate. He simply returned to his notes, as though the question answered itself. It struck deeper than any threat. Because the truth was known, entire systems had been burned, cultures lost, planets turned into ash in silence, all in the name of strategy, honor, or survival. The question exposed the vanity of the summit. It asked not why peace was needed, but why it took so long. It forced every species present to look inward. The Cthari twitched nervously. The Thrak's scale brow furrowed. Even the Ilari couldn't hide their discomfort. One psychic envoy tried probing the human's emotional state, but their neural map yielded nothing consistent, just layers of suppressed memory and cold logic. The human said nothing else for the remainder of the session, but the question lingered. It was the first moment anyone at the summit realized the humans had not come to be tolerated. They had come to be heard. The Ilari had never encountered a species they couldn't read, until humans arrived. Every known civilization had some form of emotional baseline, a neural rhythm that the Ilari's psychic arrays could trace, predict, or influence. But with humans, the scans returned nothing useful. Erratic patterns, rapid shifts, and conflicting emotional signals. It was like trying to interpret a thunderstorm through static. They were labeled anomalies at first, perhaps biologically incompatible with psionic mapping. But as reports accumulated, the truth settled uncomfortably across the minds of the Ilari and their allies. Humans could not be predicted, and that made them dangerous. The Thrak, a warlike reptilian species, scoffed at the notion until their veterans testified. During a skirmish on the Arvos Belt, a human frigate had lost power. Rather than retreat, the crew turned their ship into a missile and rammed a Thrak dreadnought. No fear, no hesitation. The black box recording showed the human captain laughing seconds before impact, not in madness, but something else, something worse. Acceptance. The Cthari, master strategists who had broken the back of 3 empires with sheer calculation, found themselves unnerved after their drones failed during interrogations. Human prisoners, even under pressure, responded with nonsense. They joked. They told stories. One sang old Earth songs that referenced things like rainbows and hellfire in the same verse. The drones overloaded, unable to process the contradictions. Then came the term whispered in diplomatic halls and military briefings alike: Death Worlders. Earth was classified as a Class 8 hazard planet, gravity too high, oxygen levels near flammable. Fauna and flora aggressively evolved to kill. Ice ages, supervolcanoes, extinction events. Humans weren't just survivors. They were forged in suffering. No other race in the Concord had evolved under such relentless pressure. And somehow, that brutality had produced poets, scientists, and explorers who now sat politely in galactic summits, sipping water and making quiet observations. Even their language was unsettling. The Ilari linguists studied human idioms and failed to grasp their meaning. Break the ice, one said during a diplomatic pause. Kill them with kindness, said another with a disarming smile. The phrases carried paradoxes: violence couched in civility, peace laced with threat. To humans, this was normal. To others, it was madness. Worse was their emotional spectrum. One human ambassador recounted Earth's history in a diplomatic briefing: world wars, genocides, nuclear standoffs. Then, in the same breath, she recited a poem about forgiveness and rebuilding. The alien analyst concluded that humans could switch between empathy and annihilation like flipping a switch. And they didn't even realize it was remarkable. The Kthari summarized it best: they are not fearless, they're used to fear, and they walk with it. No one had seen humans fire a weapon at the summit, but many began to feel as though the humans had brought something more powerful than fire, something invisible coiled beneath their skin. They brought unpredictability. And in a universe governed by logic and treaties, unpredictability was terror. They weren't a threat because they were hostile. They were a threat because they weren't afraid. When the humans finally submitted their peace proposal, it was just 23 pages long. No bloated language, no ceremonial clauses. Titled simply Conflict Resolution Options, it was written in precise, neutral terms. The Council's translators reviewed it, expecting naive suggestions from a young species. What they found instead was a quiet compilation of nightmares, delivered without emotion. Each page was a study in human conflict strategy, not hypotheticals, case studies, cold analyses of past wars from Earth's history. The Kthari ambassador, known for his detached logic, stopped reading halfway through the section labeled Escalation Scenarios. One case detailed how humans maintained deterrence during an era called the Cold War by threatening total planetary extinction. Not out of malice, out of balance. They called it mutually assured destruction. Another segment outlined psychological operations used to demoralize superior forces, tactics involving misinformation, cultural disruption, and manufactured panic. There were no embellishments, just results. In one human campaign, enemy commanders surrendered after being convinced they were hallucinating because humans deliberately pumped false broadcasts through intercepted comms. The Ilari envoys scanned the pages telepathically and recoiled. There was no rage in the memories, just structure, focus. One even collapsed from the overload. Human strategic thought was layered in emotional complexity the Ilari had no defense against. There was fear, compassion, guilt, and acceptance operating in unison. Then came the list of options if diplomacy fails. It included contingency plans that involved economic collapse, ecosystem destabilization, targeted propaganda, and if all else failed, extinction-level retaliation. The final line read, not preferred, but prepared. No species had ever submitted anything like this at a peace summit, and yet the humans delivered it like a standard briefing, hands folded, expressions unreadable. When asked if this was a threat, the diplomat responded, "No, it's a mirror. This is what peace costs after war is allowed to grow." The Thrak delegation, proud and militaristic, said nothing. Their generals recognized every tactic. They'd used versions themselves, often with shame, but the humans had mastered them and systematized them. Then came the smallest act that tipped the room into silence. A human delegate passed around small gift packets. Earth tea, he said, a calming gesture from his home. Most accepted politely. The Ilari tried it first, curious. Within moments, they began convulsing not from poisoning but sensory overload. The biochemical complexity of fermented earth herbs lit up their psychic centers like a supernova. Entire memories surfaced involuntarily. One ambassador wept openly. Another saw visions from their ancestors' lives. The tea was safe, verified by medical scans. But the impact was deep and accidental. The message wasn't lost. The humans didn't bring weapons. They brought culture. And even that was overwhelming. No one accused them of threats. No one raised an alarm. But several delegates canceled their evening events. The Kthari sent a message home, quietly recommending the decommissioning of a border fleet. The Thrak postponed the scheduled weapons test because the humans had spoken gently. And somehow, that was more terrifying than war. In the days that followed, the atmosphere within the galactic concord shifted. The human delegation never issued ultimatums, never demanded special treatment, never even raised their voices. Yet, their presence lingered in every conversation. Every policy proposal was now considered with one silent, unspoken question. What will the humans think? The Thrak, once firm on maintaining military superiority, began drafting mutual demilitarization agreements. The Kthari quietly withdrew a surveillance network bordering Terran space. Even the Ilari, still recovering from their psionic shock, initiated cultural exchange talks with Earth. The shift wasn't due to coercion. It was something far more profound, respect laced with caution. Humanity declined offers to join the Central Council. They proposed a rotating advisory seat instead. We'd rather listen and learn, one delegate said. The move unsettled many. Refusing power was rare. Declining influence, almost unheard of. The Thrak ambassador called it a strategy of patience. And suddenly, everyone began reevaluating their own policies. Across the galaxy, think tanks and military academies began studying Earth history obsessively, not to emulate it, but to understand how a species could come from a world so brutal and yet build cathedrals, write sonatas, and explore stars for curiosity's sake. How they could endure planetary collapse and still argue over ethics. How they could make war an art, yet treat peace like sacred ground. Alien children began reading human literature. Schools translated Earth's ancient texts. Poems, myths, and manifestos. Stories of fallen empires and lost love. A Tho scholar wept publicly after reading a human work about hope after apocalypse. It wasn't the destruction that broke him. It was the idea that humans believed in rebuilding, even after everything burned. In diplomatic circles, a phrase began to circulate quietly. The humans remember. It meant they carried their history like a wound, never quite healing but never forgotten. It meant they wouldn't start wars easily, but if forced, would end them decisively. At a private gathering of Concord strategists, one Ilari tactician summed it up. They speak softly, but every word is wrapped in a history of survival. We don't fear their weapons. We fear their resolve. The galaxy had mocked Earth's late arrival, had laughed at their crude ships, their chaotic governments, their strange languages. But no one laughed now. Humanity had walked into the room without threat or force, and made every power reconsider its own strength. Weeks after the summit, an Ilari child watched a human documentary about their world. Cities glowing at night, forests whispering, people laughing. Are they dangerous? The child asked. The teacher thought for a moment, then said, yes, but only if they have to be. And that was a lesson no species would ever forget. Humans didn't conquer with armies. They arrived, asked questions, told stories, and left the galaxy uneasy, awed, and irrevocably changed. No treaties were broken, no shots fired, but everyone now understood one truth. When humans show up, peace may follow. But if peace fails, so does everything else.